All right, let's talk about ultra-processed foods. I mean, they're everywhere, right? In just about every shopping cart and pantry. But what does the science actually say about them? We're going to dive into some huge new research that, believe me, uncovers some really surprising truths about what's on your plate and how it's affecting your health.
Okay, real quick before we jump in, a super important note. Everything we're talking about today is for educational purposes. We're breaking down the science, but this is absolutely not medical advice. So for any personal health questions, you've got to talk to a qualified healthcare professional. Got it? Great.
So let me ask you something. Take a look at these foods: a can of soda, a loaf of packaged bread, a bag of potato chips, and yeah, even some yogurts. What's the one thing that ties them all together? The answer might not be what you think, and it's really at the heart of what we're digging into today.
Well, they're all often classified as ultra-processed foods, or UPFs for short. And here's the key thing to understand from this definition. It's not really about a food being junk food. It's about how it's made. We're talking about industrial formulas, things made from food components and loaded with additives, things like colorants, flavor enhancers, and preservatives that make them taste amazing and last forever on the shelf.
And to make this super clear, here are some examples you see every single day. We're talking about sugary drinks, those packaged cookies and candies, bags of chips, a lot of the bread you buy at the supermarket, processed meats like hot dogs and deli slices, and yep, even some of your favorite breakfast cereals. These things are literally staples in so many kitchens.
Okay, so now for the really fascinating part, the science. Researchers have started looking at the health impact of these foods, not just in small studies, but on a truly massive scale. And that's giving us a much, much clearer picture of what the risks actually are.
And when I say massive, I am not kidding. Get this. One giant review, which was presented at a major cardiology conference, pulled together the health data from over 8 million adults. That is just a staggering number of people. So this isn't just one study's opinion, it's a powerful look at the big picture. And all of that data pointed to one critical idea, which Dr. Zhao Lu sums up perfectly here. It's what's called a dose-response relationship. What does that mean? Well, put simply, it's not an all-or-nothing thing. It's more like a volume knob. The more UPFs you eat, the more you turn up the dial on your health risks. So how much does it take to turn that dial? Well, the researchers actually figured that out. They saw that for every extra 100 grams of UPFs a person ate each day, and that's roughly the weight of a small muffin or a candy bar, the health risks went up by a measurable amount. And look at how wide-ranging those risks are. Just that one extra 100-gram serving was linked to a 14.5% higher risk of high blood pressure, a nearly 20% higher risk of digestive diseases, and even a 2.6% higher risk of dying from any cause. I mean, those are some pretty serious numbers.
Now, let's zoom in a little and focus specifically on heart health. Because while that huge review gave us the bird's eye view, other really long-term studies have zeroed in on the cardiovascular system. And frankly, what they found is just as concerning. For instance, check out the Melbourne Collaborative Cohort Study. This was no quick survey. Scientists followed almost 40,000 people for, on average, over 25 years. They got their diet info way back in the early 90s and then tracked what happened to their health all the way up to 2019. That is what you call rock-solid data. And the result? It was crystal clear. The people who ate the most ultra-processed foods had a 19% higher risk of dying from cardiovascular disease compared to those who ate the least. That's a really powerful connection between these kinds of foods and the health of our hearts.
Okay, so at this point, it feels pretty simple, doesn't it? More UPFs, more problems. Case closed. But what if it's not that simple? Here's where the story takes a really interesting turn. Is it possible that not all ultra-processed foods are created equal? Well, the answer seems to be not exactly. A big study from researchers at Harvard decided to dig a little deeper. They didn't just throw all UPFs into one big bucket. Instead, they carefully separated them into different categories to see if some were actually worse for our hearts than others. And this is what they found. It's fascinating, right? You can see a clear split. On one side, no surprise, processed meats and sugary drinks were linked to a higher risk of heart problems. But here's the shocker. On the other side, things like cold cereals, yogurt, ice cream, and even savory snacks were actually associated with a lower risk. So, what on earth is going on? The researchers think the villain might not just be the processing itself, but the actual nutritional profile of the food.
Think about it. A cereal that's fortified with fiber is just fundamentally different from a soda that's basically sugar and water, or a processed meat that's packed with sodium. The ingredients still really, really matter. And that leads us to some really practical advice from the study's senior author, Professor Josie Mermate. The science is just so consistent on this. Processed meats and sugary drinks are bad news. So if you're going to make just one change, targeting those two should be your absolute top priority. So what's the bottom line here? It seems the whole conversation is getting more nuanced. The goal maybe shouldn't be about this impossible quest for a perfect diet with zero processed foods. Instead, it's about a more achievable goal, mindful reduction, and just making smarter choices day to day. So here's a simple 3-step game plan based on all this science. First, just work on reducing your overall intake. Remember that dose response thing? Every little bit you cut back helps. Second, prioritize. Start with the worst offenders we just talked about, sugary drinks and processed meats. And third, replace them. Don't just leave a hole in your diet, actively swap in whole foods or minimally processed options, kind of like the stuff you'd find in a Mediterranean diet. And that really brings us to the end. This research gives us a much smarter way to think about our food. But, the whole journey really does start with one small step. So I'll just leave you with this to think about. What's one small swap you can realistically make this week? Thanks for watching.